Hey, good afternoon. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. Thank you so much for spending time here on At the Mic, the Thursday Deep Dive edition. We gather here every Thursday and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you are unaware, now you are. And on Friday, we like to just, watch animal videos and hang out together. On Thursdays, we focus on one topic, and we will get to that here momentarily with an awesome guest for you. As always, I want to say thank you to Hero West for all that he does over at themicshow.com, that website right there. Bookmark it, everything you need, all the links to YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Rumble, it's all there. Thank you, Wes, for all that you do for the show. And over at Instagram at The Mic Show, where Gabby handles everything. And it's a labor of love. They are awesome people, and I'm grateful for both of them. And I'm grateful for all of you for just hanging out here the way you do. And also for just started. Remember, we just mentioned it last week. 17 of you have already subscribed to this, my X channel feed page thing, $2 a month. I have no idea what you're going to get for that, but I do appreciate the support. I'm grateful. I am grateful for all of you who not only have subscribed, and that's what you got to do over at YouTube as well. Like, rate, whatever it is, review, subscribe to all the channels and stuff. And thank you as always for all the time that you allow me to hang out with you. So we need to talk about September 11th, 2001, and what came after that for our beloved country, because that was a very traumatic event. We have discussed alternate theories around the official story on shows in the past. If you want to check out the archive pinned to the top here, there's many unanswered questions around that day, but that is not today's conversation. Today's conversation is the surveillance state that came after that. What happened to America after 9/11? That is today's topic. And I want to bring in someone who is way more than qualified to discuss this, George Hill. And let me do this. Let me put this up there. Look at this. See this? Okay, here we go. Former FBI National Security Intelligence Supervisor. His resume is impeccable. I mean, George, you've got the knowledge. You've got the street cred, as the young kids might say. You, sir, are a wealth of information. And I know we've talked about this in the past on a deep dive episode about the Patriot Act specifically, but I really wanted to just have a larger discussion so that Americans can really understand what has changed in our country 24 years later. So welcome, George. I appreciate you making time today, sir.
Hey, Keith. It's great to be back. Thank you.
Okay. So former FBI National Security Intelligence Supervisor, professor, Marine. I'm not allowed to say former Marine, right? There are no former Marines.
No, there are no ex-Marines, but yeah, former active duty Marine. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, bless you, sir.
No, J.D. Vance is a former Marine, so.
Okay. Yes. Now, so you have dealt with intelligence and counterintelligence. You've done so much in defense of our nation. Just kind of give a thumbnail sketch, I guess, as to what you were, a little bit about your background before 9/11, and then I guess kind of what your role in law enforcement was following 9/11.
Yeah, so I was just a regular run-of-the-mill jarhead for 13 years prior to 9/11. I had to get out because of some life circumstances, and I was out for about 9 years and decided to go back into the reserves and get some kind of retirement out of it. Nothing noteworthy, of a pat on the back or anything like that. It was strictly a financial decision to get 7 years and get some sort of retirement check out of it. And I got waived off by the Marine Corps at that time in 1999. The world was pretty much at peace. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and there wasn't really a focus on national defense. And like I said, the Marine Corps waived me off, and the Navy was more than happy to take me, and I had to go to their intelligence training program which is very different than the Marine Corps' intelligence, and rightfully so, because the Navy operates in multiple domains, the Marine Corps not so much, and of course the technology is different. And so on September 11th, 2001, I was in my office as a civilian and also as a naval reservist when the planes crashed into the buildings, and almost 3,000 Americans died that day. And my life changed forever. It didn't end, so no complaining from me. But wound up getting mobilized 3 times after 9/11. On my last deployment, just ahead of that, my company reorganized the marketing department, and oddly enough, I was the only person reorganized out of a job. And I sued under Title 38 USERRA, which has no teeth in it, and got a small settlement, and was unemployed in my mid-40s after 3 deployments. And I was on orders, just trying to earn some money, and I was out in San Diego on a ship conducting training out there for a week or 2 on how to properly handle detainees ahead of their upcoming Mideast deployment, and got a phone call from the National Security Agency, and wound up working for those good people for 5 years doing find, fix, finish operations, deeply in the GWAT, the Global War on Terror, as it was referred to back then. The country was very different in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That was really before the rise of ISIS. And then circumstances intervened again, and I wound up moving over to the FBI, where I became the Boston Field Office National Security Intelligence Supervisor, where I had counterterrorism, cyber, and counterintelligence. And I had those for about 10 years. And towards the end of that 10 years, I was the co-supervisor for the Boston Marathon Bombing Task Force as well, on top of everything else. And I was, for lack of a better word, just completely burned out. And so I had an opportunity to move over into gangs and drugs for my last almost 2 years with the Bureau, and didn't know anything about that stuff. It was a real eye-opener and a great education for me. And I'm happy I did it. But I was an unwitting participant in 20 years of war. Trained up lots of people to deploy overseas. Thankfully, I never lost a sailor to combat, although I did lose quite a few to cancers from the burn pits.
Yeah. Okay, so you have worn many hats, as you just laid out for us. Let me ask you this. How would you define national security? Because you just mentioned how we're a much different country than we were 20 years ago. So, and maybe this isn't a fair question, and maybe it's not something that can be simplified down into just a response like this. But it feels like national security, the definition before 9/11 and after 9/11, at least from those making decisions, seems like that has changed over the years.
It changed dramatically, and it changed sometime around September 12th at Camp David with George Bush and Bob Mueller when he came there. When I was in the Marine Corps, national security meant the continuation of the United States and the protection of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
When Bob Mueller visited George Bush at Camp David, George Bush said, "I know you're going to catch these guys, Bob, but what are you going to do to stop the next attack?" And that's when our definition of national security changed from protecting the country and the Constitution to no person shall die under the hand of a terrorist. And in order to achieve that zero defect goal, we had to shunt aside the Bill of Rights and the Constitution protections in order to do that. And that's when the country changed. At that time, the FBI began its journey from a law enforcement agency into a domestic intelligence agency, and we'll talk more about that as our conversation progresses. But prior to December 11th, national security was completely different, and it changed. So now we're talking what, 24 years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's actually part of our psyche that national security means that no one shall die at the hands of a terrorist. And it's even devolved even beyond that, that no one's allowed to say hurtful words anymore. So it's changed a lot, and your audience can quickly figure out that I'm an old man. The country's very different today than when I grew up, and dramatically so after 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I guess the other side of, okay, so you and I would say, I shouldn't say this to you. I know that, speaking for myself, I feel like I am much more of a civil libertarian in that, I value my freedom and my liberties staying intact, as opposed to the security that is offered by a larger, all-knowing, all-encompassing federal government. But I think the counter to that could be, well, I mean, your freedom and your liberties mean nothing if you're dead, Keith. So I guess, can you make the case from the government's point of view here? Hey, look, we got some good law enforcement tools now that can prevent this stuff from happening. Is there a coherent argument that one can make from the standpoint of the federal government in a post 9/11 America?
I'll quote two people, Ben Franklin, who said that, that those who, what about something about the blanket of freedom, are willing to sacrifice freedom for safety deserve neither.
Yeah, it deserved neither. It's the greatest quote, and every time I try to say it, I screw it up.
Yeah. And then I'll quote that other great American film hero, governor of California during COVID, who said, "Screw your freedom," Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a large swath of the country still believes that, that somehow if you don't get the COVID vaccine, you're a threat to me. And oh, by the way, the vaccine works. I have the vaccine, but you don't have the vaccine, so somehow you're a threat to me. Like, I'm cold, so I wear a coat. You won't wear a coat, so you must wear a coat because I'm wearing a coat. I mean,
right.
the logic has become so twisted and perverted that I used to be kind of lean on the civil libertarian side of it. I'm pretty much a hardcore conservative Bill of Rights guy, because in order to be a true civil libertarian, you have to believe of live and let live. Well, and half the country wants to shoot me in the face for my beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So, to quote another great person of history, Gold in my ear, you can't live with people who want to kill you.
I mean, that's, yes, perfectly stated. Yes. And boy, it sure would be, it would be a much different country if we could just agree on the Bill of Rights. And there's so many people that claim to agree in the principles of the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. But boy, when it comes to putting them into practice, if it doesn't benefit their side, then all of a sudden it's not worth enforcing.
Well, let me give you a quick example. This is to sharpen your point. Bill of Rights, Second Amendment shall not be infringed. Pretty clear cut on this. There's been Supreme Court cases that have clarified it for the people who just refuse to understand. So it's an articulated right in the Constitution. Gay marriage, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that every state must recognize gay marriage, but yet they do. Yet, if I want to take my concealed carry permit from Massachusetts and travel to New Jersey, I can't. So the Bill of Rights means nothing to the powers that be.
Boy, I mean, seriously, the 9th and 10th Amendments are the most underappreciated and underused amendments available to us. Boy, I think I smell another show going through the Bill of Rights with George Hill. Okay, so going to 9/11 specifically, because as you saw the subtext of this show's title, it's right there. America after 9/11, did the terrorists win? And I've been thinking about this since you and I agreed to do this show. To oversimplify it, maybe the terrorists didn't win, but they certainly broke even, considering that they still have control of Afghanistan, and well, hell, they have a bunch of military equipment. But I think who really won after 9/11, it certainly wasn't us, the American citizens. It was big government, right? Would you agree with that assessment, that the real winners were those that run this government and have all of these law enforcement tools, which we will get into, at their fingertips?
Well, they clearly won, and maybe the terrorists didn't win, but they succeeded in changing the country, which is remarkable. Look, it's the Constitution that's under attack. It's the Constitution that the left seeks to undermine all the time, because it was written by evil slave-owning white men. And the terrorists have achieved the exact same thing that the leftists want to achieve, which is to weaken the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
I mean, it's that simple, yes. So following 9/11, I was looking up before we went on the air today. It was exactly 6 weeks after 9/11 that the Patriot Act was signed into law. And I did send you a clip. I forgot to have it ready for today. But, of course, Joe Biden took credit for the Patriot Act numerous times after it passed, which, I mean, Joe Biden has taken credit for literally everything under the sun. So it's probably not the best barometer, but it would just be too perfect that we can pin the Patriot Act on Joe Biden, of all people. But can you give us kind of a drilled down explanation of what the Patriot Act empowered our government to do, and who was it used to surveil? Because it doesn't feel like it was terrorists as much as it was you and me.
The Patriot Act put together infrastructure, both in writing and as far as creating government entities. So not only did we get the TSA, but we got DHS and that monolith. So any businessman or woman will be able to tell you that the larger the organization, the more difficult it is to manage and actually have accountability. So it created this monster that congressional oversight cannot conduct oversight on. So when Chuck Schumer said that the intelligence community has 7 ways from Sunday to get back at you, he was serious, because they do. They answer to no one. We saw that with John Brennan and James Clapper, and the shenanigans that they've pulled over time. So the bigger it is, the less accountability it is. So it gave us TSA under the auspices of DHS. And then it also gave us the Director of National Intelligence, which started out at Liberty Crossing in Virginia, one floor in a high-rise building. At the same time, it gave us NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, which was a multi-agency entity designed to identify terrorist threats originating from overseas that were directed towards the United States. Well, since that time, there are now 2 high-rise buildings at Liberty Crossing, one for NCTC, which is probably 50% contractors, and then the Office of Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard's outfit. And she reduced that staff by about 40%. I can tell you right now, my time in Boston, and even at NSA, I never saw an NCTC product that prompted me to go into my boss and say, hey, have you seen this? We need to really reevaluate what we're doing here.
But all of those things you just mentioned were created in the Patriot Act?
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's the thing, right? A quarter of a century later, people just take them as this is how we do business today.
Right.
I mean, Tulsi Gabbard eliminated 40% of the Director of National Intelligence. I feel less safe today than yesterday, but only because of world events, not because of something that Tulsi Gabbard did.
Mm-hmm.
Having worked in the federal government and the private sector, I can assure you that 60% of the people are just collecting a paycheck for showing up to work. anywhere. The Patriot Act also gave us the fusion centers, there are 56 of those throughout the country. Some states obviously have more than one. And in those fusion centers is a representative from DHS, FBI, and then various people from each state all of a sudden magically by waving of a wand become intelligence analysts. And you work together in one facility. And the idea there is to be able to share classified information down to such a level that it can reach the law enforcement, actually driving a cruiser on the street.
So can you take us through a typical day of a national security analyst and what it's like for them on the job?
Depends on what they do and what agency. If you're not collecting, and there's only a couple types of collection going on. There's human intelligence where you're actually running sources overseas. That's what the CIA and DIA are supposed to do. There is NGA, National Geospatial Agency, and the NSA, the National Security Agency. So NGA is collecting using satellites to collect overhead imagery, and the NSA is collecting signals intelligence. So they are the inject port for the national intelligence apparatus. And by the way, there's nothing I'm talking about here that's classified. I won't even do that by accident today. So, and then they have multiple roles within each one of those organizations, whether it's linguist or analyst or people that are doing fusion. In other words, looking at other forms of intelligence and trying to pull together a more comprehensive picture. And then it synthesizes down. So when the government says, well, what Joe Biden during his debate with Trump said, there are 19 intelligence agencies that said that had all the hallmarks of a Russian operation. There are not 19 intelligence agencies. Those are 19 people that are in the intelligence community to get to look at intelligence from other entities. But if you're not collecting, you're not an intelligence activity.
Okay. Shoot, I'm looking for that that link that I sent you. Oh, wait, here it is. Hold on. Let me just play this, and because there was a comment there in. Oh boy, hang on. I'm having to listen to it.
You muted yourself.
Okay. There we go. Sorry. All right. I was talking as a thing was playing there. C-SPAN does ads. Awesome. Okay. So Chris made a comment here when I mentioned how 6 weeks to the day after 9/11 we had the Patriot Act, and I said, and so Chris says, guaranteed it was written years ahead of time. Absolutely. I don't know how truthful Joe Biden is. You could say that as a preface to any statement, but this right here, you're right, Chris. They were clearly trying to get something like this enacted long before September 11th, 2001. This is after 9/11, and Joe Biden is speaking here. So God only knows how much of what he's saying here is true.
Opposed to it right after 1994, and you can ask the Attorney General this because I got a call when he introduced the Patriot Act. He said, Joe, I'm introducing the act basically as you wrote it in 1994. It was defeated then, not by any liberals. It was defeated then by the folks who were worried that we'd have the Minutemen would get in trouble, by the Mr. Barrs of the world, who were worried about the right wing, not anything else. So that has nothing to do with you all, but just to set the record straight.
Okay.
Almost the same thing that got passed, the Patriot Act, was introduced by me in 1994, and it was the right wing that defeated it. You guys tried to help get it passed.
Oh, there's George. Okay, great. So there you go. That crazy right wingers were trying to stop the Patriot Act, and then
Well, in 1994, the country was very different. Remember,
I was gonna say
that was a year. That was Waco. That was a year before the Oklahoma City bombing. There was all this talk about right wing militias. The country was very different then as well. But that kind of passed. And there's still questions that linger today about the Oklahoma City bombing. But Joe Biden is a serial liar.
Serial liar. Exactly.
If you're cornering him, he'd probably tell you that he was actually already on the moon and lowered the ladder for the lunar landing module for them guys to come down.
And then September 11th comes along and never let a crisis go to waste, as Rahm Emanuel taught us. Then you get something like the Patriot Act. Okay, so So a lot of there was a lot of government expansion.
Well, I left out one really key part because we moved it on so quickly.
I'm sorry.
There was a lot of debate in that 6 weeks' time. It was agreed upon by the people who actually wrote the act. And by the way, I did a deep dive. I could not find Joe Biden in evidence anywhere in any committees.
That's why I said you never know what to believe that man says.
Yeah. So it was agreed by the people in the commission that the U.S. needed a domestic intelligence agency. The question that they were battering around was, is it going to be like the British setup of MI5, which is their domestic intelligence agency, or are we going to do something else? And what they elected to do was, we're going to have a domestic intelligence agency, but we're not going to make it a standalone. We're just going to lash it up to the FBI, and so that we don't shred people's civil liberties. All those people are going to belong to our newly created Director of National Intelligence. So the entire FBI intelligence program increased the manning level for the FBI by just under 45%. So they almost doubled in size overnight at the onset of the Patriot Act, with an intelligence capability that they never had before. All those 0132s, that's a job series, that entire group belongs to DNI Tulsi Gabbard. She could change the police state with the stroke of a pen and just end the FBI's intelligence program. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino will never do it. They're not change agents. They weren't sent there to change. They portrayed themselves as change agents, but they're not. So the FBI got all those intelligence bodies. I think they picked up over 60 senior executive positions, which was a field day for the agents that were still there, because even though those are supposed to be intelligence bodies, those went to agents, which is a much better retirement gig, both from a retirement salary standpoint and getting another job once you leave. Then they brought in a woman by the name of Maureen Baczynski, who came from the National Security Agency. And I was still at NSA when this happened. And she was spoken with reverence throughout the agency, as a brilliant mind, dedicated. I apologize if I get it wrong. I believe that she was never married, that she was just, dedicated. I never found anybody in that entity that spoke ill of her. And Bob Mueller quickly dismissed her in about a year. She was trying to build a program. And then it floundered around for a couple of years. And then he brought in the consultant to consultant, McKinsey and Company. And that's where we have the monster that we have today.
Okay. So it felt like a dangerous world after 9/11. And
oh yeah.
And don't even get me into the anthrax attacks talk, because that is another deep dive show waiting to happen all of its own, and the hallmarks of where that powder actually came from and so on.
Well, more people died of fentanyl than anthrax. Okay, so we keep on killing 100,000 people a year bringing in fentanyl, but we won't call that a weapon of mass destruction. But anthrax, we're going to throw a hissy fit over. But
right, and that was the time when, I don't have my timeline in front of me, but I feel like when was the first anthrax attack? Because the bill gets introduced, I think, on October 23rd. First anthrax attack. Surely that was 2001. What was that? September 18th. Good grief! 1 week later. All right. So clearly, I mean, look, we're a nation where you got to strike while the iron's hot. If you're trying to change the face of the American government, and you're trying to tell a free people that we need to expand this protection to make sure that something as horrific as what you watched on your TV screens on Tuesday morning, September 11th, never happens again. So we get the Patriot Act. It's because it's always a good idea to pass big laws, sweeping laws, when you have a crisis on your hands. Let's go back to March of 2020, shall we? No, but when it comes to the Patriot Act, and again, a case can be made, not by me, but a case can be made by people who just like, you can go to a little league game and talk to young parents and just say, hey, I mean, look, this is why we had to pass the Patriot Act. Surely, George Hill, there were some important law enforcement tools that came out of that, and a new way of doing things that have kept us safe. Yes?
No.
No.
So there's a process in place whereby the FBI gets notified by the national security apparatus of a threat to the United States. So I was with the FBI in a national security position for a decade. During that time, we had one case where that actually happened, and they teach it at the academy because there was one case. That was Rahim, I think was his last name. And he got caught by a Five Eye partner, FVEY, meaning someone in the United Kingdom, hoovered up some intelligence of him communicating with an operative whose name escapes me. I used to keep the video of that guy getting drone striked on my computer if I never needed a quick pick me up. And he came to the Brits' attention, and they quickly notified the FBI. And I think it was Memorial Weekend, because I was not in Massachusetts. I was further north, and got a text, email on my unclassified phone saying, get into the office. Well, I knew what that meant. And went into the office, brought up the top secret enclave in the SCIF, secure compartmented information facility. And lo and behold, this guy had glummed on to wanting to kill Pamela Geller, who was sponsoring Draw Muhammad contest at that time, because it is an apostasy, a sin punishable by death under Sharia law, to make images of the prophet. And so he was going to kill her. And so because he was communicating with a foreign terrorist organization, we were able to go up on a FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. All perfectly legal, all perfectly constitutional. And so we increased tempo of operations to 24/7, watching this guy. Long story short, he gets ventilated by the JTTF when he tried to come at them with a knife that was just under the length of a machete. And his brother went to trial. He was convicted as well because he was a willing participant in this. He was part of that plan to kill Miss Geller. That's the only time that we have waived our constitutional rights under the guise of making sure that no American shall die of terrorism, that I actually saw the construct work. Look, living in a free world is a dangerous place, and I'd rather live free and dangerously than safe in the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amen. So 2001, we get the Patriot Act and all of the expansion of government and surveillance that comes with that. Let's fast forward to, feels like it was the end of 2012 or early 2013. I'd have to check my timelines here, but about that time is when we get the information of what the government is doing through the NSA. Thank you to Edward Snowden. Can you give us like a brief overview of, refresh our memories, what was revealed by Edward Snowden?
Oh, Christ. I forget the programs that he revealed from the NSA. And even if I did know them off the top of my head, the names of those programs are still classified. And even though they're in the public domain, I'd still be in violation of my non-disclosure agreements for repeating them.
Oh, boy.
But we did learn a lot about how the NSA collects. And, you know, when the Snowden case first broke, I was mortified. I was a flag waving patriot. Multiple deployments overseas throughout 2 different careers, Marine Corps and Navy. And then I listened. It was so long. It took Joe Rogan 2 podcasts to interview Snowden, and it changed my mind. That's the difference between a conservative and a leftist. I'm willing to listen to an opposing point of view. I mean, truly listen, actively listen.
Yes.
And he changed my mind. And the NSA collects everything that moves around the globe. They still do. This latest incident with these Sims farms that we discovered in New York.
Right.
My contact at Akamai said that about 63% now of all threat traffic actually starts with inside the United States. So the NSA has become a victim of their own success in terms of hoovering up everything around the world in the way of electronic communications.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, you kind of answered one of my questions. Is going to be Edward Snowden, hero or traitor? And
Look, Donald Trump missed a golden opportunity on his first administration. If he had just pardoned, oh goodness gracious, the guy who founded WikiLeaks.
Holy crap, we're both drawing a blank at the same time. Someone will hit me in the chat. Oh my gosh. What is happening to us, George?
Yeah.
Anyway, Julian Assange.
If he had pardoned Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and brought them back to the United States, we would not be in the constitutional crisis that we're in right now.
Explain.
They have the keys to the kingdom. They know everything. If he had just given them a full pardon and brought them back, we would have had 2 guides, that could navigate us through the wilderness and say, that needs to go, that, and that. Like, I can help you deconstruct the FBI because I lived on the inside. But those gentlemen have an even broader view than I have on the national collection apparatus.
And it was Mike Pompeo that stopped that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Mike Pompeo, who also recommended the woman who became head of the CIA. I can't remember her name now. But she was chief of station in London, and she was front and center for the whole Russia hoax, and had interactions with the British fellow who wrote the Steele dossier. So Mike Pompeo is a bad guy.
Yeah, and that's the difference between, for the most part, there are plenty of exceptions, of course, but I think that is the biggest difference between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration is, and he said so himself in interviews, that he just kind of accepted people that, that would help him fill out these government roles, people that he thought he could trust, and sure as hell could not. And a much different story when
look, I mean,
have it now.
In a trusting society, for any society to function, there has to be a certain degree of trust, and you have to have trust in your institutions. So you want to be able to trust that the CIA is doing everything above board, in accordance with the law and their own internal guidelines to keep the country safe, as you want to believe that the FBI and the NSA are also operating within the confines and constructs of congressional oversight and the laws that are in place. For society to function, you need to believe that. Where we're at now is we're finding out, painfully so, that these institutions are about themselves, not so much the American people.
Kara, is this the name we're looking for there? Gina Haspel?
Gina Haspel, yep, 100%. Thank you, Kara.
Do you have... Yeah, because, I mean, there are so many names that get thrown at us that it's tough to remember all these. So thank you, Kara. Yeah, she's somebody that I should... her name's popped up enough that I should have more information up here about her, I think. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out where to go from here. Okay, so because I remember some of the Snowden stuff that was revealed. I remember there were programs that you could go to a search engine and start typing in stuff and then backspace it, and that's captured. You don't even have to hit enter on the search. Like, there are so many just jaw-dropping things that Edward Snowden revealed, and I knew at the time, I said to myself, we're going to forget about this as a country. I'm going to forget about all of this stuff that is leaving me dumbfounded. I'm personally going, and sure as hell, both are true. And I just remember Prism was a thing that just captured, it's stunning. It's stunning, the kind of stuff that we let our government get away with.
So it's one thing to capture this stuff, right? So the NSA captures and catalogs, right? It's another thing to use it. So for example, I was decorated by the director of national intelligence for my work during the Mumbai attack. And there were instances where it's kind of like for the protection against the United States persons, USPers, that you can't spy on a Five Eye partner either.
Explain Five Eye. Who's that?
It's the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. So those are the 5 English-speaking partners that share intelligence pretty openly. There are instances where you get intelligence products that are, quote, REL, R-E-L, meaning release, U.S. only, or they may have their versions of that as well. But we had Five Eye partners roaming around Fort Meade every day. I would brief General Alexander on a weekly basis for a couple of years on all matters counterterrorism related, and there would be Five Eye partners in the room, and occasionally he would ask a question, and I would say, I can't get into that right now, sir, I can get back to you. And he knew what that meant. It was just a gentlemanly way of saying, like, sorry guys, rules are rules, can't tell you. So that's the Five Eye community. So you're not supposed to be spying on the Five Eye community. And there were ways that I could basically conduct a parallel investigation and have another country, and I'm not going to, like maybe India, for example, get some intelligence from them so that I could look at what these other Five Eye partners were doing. But you can't do that. It's against, well, it might be against Executive Order 12333, but there was a couple documents that you really had to test out of the NSA every year to make sure that you were in compliance with. So United States persons, USPers, Five Eye partners, off limits, you want to get jammed up, go ahead and violate that. You're going to get jammed up. And so the FBI can do the same thing now, because at the end of Barack Obama's administration, he changed Executive Order 12333 and made the NSA's databases available to the FBI. And so if you're an FBI analyst and you're investigating George Hill, who is a Croatian international arms dealer, but you really want to get at Keith Malinak, so you keep on looking. It's like, oh my God, here I have George Hill in contact with Keith Malinak. So now I'm going to go up on now I can start to look at that and open up a parallel investigation completely unrelated to national security or FISA collection on George Hill, the Croatian arms dealer.
Right.
So the NSA databases in and of themselves are harmless, to our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Is what people do with them that are the problem. And the people that are abusing it the most, almost exclusively, is the FBI.
The FBI. Yeah, and I recall, I think it was our mutual friend, Steve Friend, who I heard on an interview talking about when Kash Patel had been nominated to be FBI director and then got an alert or something from the Biden administration that like some foreign entity was trying to hack in to his email. And the way that it was explained by Steve, and I'm going to completely butcher this, is that you can basically make up any excuse to get into someone's email. It felt like it's a kind of a simple path to get that ball rolling. Like, forgot what he said, but like they can open up a threat assessment or something. I don't know. They make up some excuse to get into your email based on who had sent something to you, but I forget the whole details of that.
Yeah, so that's what I guess an easier example for people to understand is during the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton got a briefing from the FBI, and you got it right, as a threat assessment that the Russians were targeting her campaign, but they elected not to give Donald Trump the same briefing. It's kind of like that, that he would have gotten notice that, hey, he, meaning Cash, would have got notice that a foreign country, a threat nation, is trying to access your email account.
And how would they know that to begin with?
You would get that as an alert from the National Security Agency. So they're what they're called, they're masked. So you get notification that someone in your either AOR, area of operations, or in your organization is being targeted by a foreign entity. Do you want the name? And there's a process you go through and says, yes, give me the name. And then you get that same information back with the name unmasked. So Samantha Powers, when she was at the United Nations, had hundreds of names unmasked, something no UN ambassador had ever done before. And she was just basically trying to get names in order to open up unlawful investigations of people that were not in the Obama sphere, specifically Trump, and the whole Russian collusion hoax. So there's a whole process for masking and unmasking. So all USPers, when the NSA is collecting, all USPers are masked as a matter of procedure. Then they notify the FBI. Again, it's lawful. And I would have my analyst ask me, like, this is what I got from the NSA today. Do we want to, pursue this any further? And we look at it together and say, no, this is not ours, or yes. And then once that name comes back unmasked at the Bureau, what we would do then is run that through our databases, and then just a quick blurb, back, just acknowledging, thank you or something like that, but never like, oh, thank goodness you sent this to us. This guy's a real dirtbag and blah, 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 blah. So there are protocols in place to do this. It's just that we've chosen not to do it.
Right.
It comes down to people.
Yeah.
So when I was in Gitmo, I was the Saudi Arabian team chief down there. So I had my own detainees that I would interrogate, and then I had 24/7 interrogation operations going on. This is all of 2004. And Abu Ghraib broke at that time, and the Navy and the DOD, everybody panicked. And so my tour of duty ended, and I met with the admiral in charge of the Navy Reserve's intelligence program. And he said, well, what do we got to do to keep this sort of thing from happening again? What protocols can we put in place? And I said, you have to do what you've been doing, which is identify the very best people for the work, be very selective, and then have a rigorous training process where you weed out people that don't meet up. But then once you put that person into an interrogation booth with them, it's all on them. So we can have congressional oversight. We can have these safeguards and guardrails and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the man or woman that's actually doing the work. And that's where I said, we're talking about a trust society. We want to believe, we want to trust that the people at our intelligence entities are decent people that are abiding by the law and have reverence for the Bill of Rights and are doing the right thing. But at the end of the day, you've got to trust Keith and George to do the right thing.
So you mentioned congressional oversight. I mean, that is as close as we get to, and it's designed this way. I mean, those are our representatives in Washington, D.C. Those are our voices. It's an unfair question. I'll tell you that ahead of time. But what percentage of this gargantuan federal spy state that we are all under, how much of it do you think is really understood by Congress? I don't know how you can quantify that, but okay, what percentage of Congress do you think actually understands the capabilities of this government?
What percentage of Congress understand what's going on with the government or the intelligence apparatus?
Understands what the intelligence apparatus is capable of.
So it's a couple things. Let's start with the foundation first. The New York Times in 2003, I think, did an article entitled, "What's the difference between a Sunni and a Shia?" So we're building this great intelligence apparatus, and Congress doesn't even know what the difference is. They had polling data. Congress doesn't even know the difference between a Sunni and a Shia, which is a really kind of a big deal. So let's start there. That's our foundation. Let's go forward now to about 2010, 2011. Yeah, probably about 2011, 2012. Dana Priest of the Washington Post and one other journalist did a series of articles looking at the intelligence community and the tremendous amount of overlap. So based on their data alone, there's probably about a 66, 2/3 percentage overlap between all the intelligence agencies out there. So it's more than twice as large as it needs to be. So you've got people running around looking for work and idle hands, right? They're the devil's playground.
Sure.
And then Mike Waller, who's a friend of mine, wrote a great book called Big Intel, which I highly recommend reading. People who want to get their head around just how massive the intelligence collection apparatus is. And, we saw what the Stasi was able to do back in the analog days. Well, now we have the Stasi with facial recognition, gait recognition, license plate readers, the whole 9 yards. So they're fully in the digital age, and they're just as intrusive as the Stasi was.
Right. Okay. Wow. You've already touched on right there a couple of things I want to ask you about. I recently heard a fun fact, George, is a fun fact that every call, every voicemail, every text from Americans for the next 500 years is being stored at that gargantuan facility in Utah. Is that accurate? Do you know?
I don't know about the 500 years, but yeah. I remember when they had to build it.
Yeah.
It was the two things happened. It was the invention of the smartphone and multimedia that can reside on a smartphone, and the telecommunications companies. They used to store all that data. And the NSA, and they said, well, we're not going to store it beyond a certain length of time. I think it was like 5 years. And the NSA said, not a problem. Uncle Sugar's got a big fat wallet. We'll take care of it for you.
Okay. Yeah. Boy, how do they keep all that stuff cool out? All those computers cool out there. There's no water close by, is there? Or I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay.
Utah is interesting. Most of your NSA linguists are Mormon and come from Utah because they have their hopefully it's the right term. They're evangelists.
They're missionaries.
Yes, they're missionaries. And so in terms of a population set for the United States, having multilingual population set, that's where it's at.
That's interesting.
Utah.
So they go on these missions,
yeah.
I guess, learn the language, and then they can apply it to a government job analyzing.
Yep, exactly. Well, that's the thing, right? So I did find fixed finish operations. So when you're finding a target and then fixing their location, it's not electronic. It's a man or a woman who's been listening to that person in some cases for years, and they know their tone of language, they know their moods, they know how they punctuate their sentences, they know that person inside and out. And we may get there someday with artificial intelligence, but it's a man or a woman with a set of headphones on, listening to hours and hours of people talking trash, and saying, yeah, that's Abu Bad Guy from Trashcanistan, and this is where he is.
Abu Bad Guy from Trashcanistan. That's awesome. And Benjamin makes a point. He's over in Denmark. He talks about their interrogations getting outsourced to places like Lithuania to circumvent certain human rights. I mean, that's what we do, right? I mean,
Yeah, no, the black sites were notoriously written about. Yeah, absolutely. You know, the interesting thing about interrogations is that I might be wrong on the exact percentage, but 70% of people respond to direct questioning, which is I ask a question, you answer me back, in that first 24 hours of capture. That's where most of your intelligence is gained. So you don't have to come at anybody hard or play any kind of mind games. It's just like, oh my God, Keith, that was horrible. You just saw 5 of your friends get smoked by a bunch of SEALs. You know, how are you feeling? Can I get you a glass of water? And usually 9 times out of 10, it's going to go pretty well from that point forward.
And this is when you're talking to Abu Bad Guy from Trashcanistan.
Yeah, but you got to meet him in Trashcanistan, right? So if you give him time to, you know, to collect himself, you know, so like the people that were coming to Gitmo from an intelligence standpoint were useless from an operational standpoint, but they were extremely valuable in the intelligence community learning about the global jihad movement. We knew nothing. Really, Michael Scheuer and a few people did at the CIA, a few FBI joint task forces, but we knew nothing on September 11th, 2001. We didn't know anything about funding, how they're recruited. Remember, this is all like, you know, almost pre-internet. You know, people got recruiting tapes on cassettes that they picked up at the mosque.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. So this next question I'm going to ask you, I had thought about this because we were going to have this conversation on 9/11. And then obviously the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk preempted the programming topic here. So we moved this back a couple of weeks. But as I look at this next question I want to ask you, it has a different hue to it now, I guess, because I wanted to talk to you about how the FBI tags cases as domestic terrorism. And maybe we can talk about that in connection with January 6th. But as I'm sitting here today, I'm thinking of it in the context of Antifa with that designation now through executive order. Can you talk to us about, help us to understand domestic terrorism in the United States?
There is no such thing as a domestic terrorist organization. Trump just invented that out of whole cloth by calling them a DTO. He could have easily and lawfully declared them an international terrorist organization, or an FTO, a foreign terrorist.
That's the one that has teeth in it, correct?
Right. Yeah. That's where you can go up on FISAs and things of that nature. So, and you could have made a legal argument there because we just witnessed this week horrible protests in the Netherlands and France with Antifa on the street in Black Bloc. Hopefully your audience knows what Black Bloc is.
I don't.
It's when they all dress up in black and then I go coordinated military movements.
I've never heard a term associated with it.
Black Bloc. And you know, all you have to do is just find them in communication. This is where the NSA would come in with a U.S. number or email address. Then you would unmask that. You send it to the FBI. Then you go up and you get a FISA, and then you're off to the races, and you can start taking that organization apart. You know, it may have played well on Twitter and Truth Social declaring it a domestic terrorist organization, but there is no legal construct in U.S. code for that. Now, the FBI does have domestic terrorist squads that that focus in on strictly homegrown entities. So your climate pagans who, you know, like to shoot at power substations or hammer nails into trees or burn down entire construction sites to protect the spotted wood owl or whatever. You know, so, you know, groups like that. You know, we haven't had an abortion shooting in a while, but, you know, there are groups, you know, like back in the 90s that would have fallen under that group that were planning to commit violent acts. But those are domestic terrorists, and those can be prosecuted under U.S. code. That exists, but there is nothing in U.S. code for a DTO, a domestic terrorist organization. And then for January 6th, that's when the FBI really perverted the law and labeled all those people who were wandering through with their cell phones taking pictures as domestic terrorists. I forget what the case code is that they use for that. I've been out of it for a while. But by policy and procedure, they're supposed to open up all those cases in D.C. since that's where the crime took place, alleged crime. Instead, they opened them up from Miami to Seattle, from San Diego to Bangor, Maine, in order to put the narrative out there that we had domestic terrorists all over the country and we're close to losing our democracy.
So if you had to, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being not political at all, 10 being the most political, where would you put the FBI today, say, during the Biden administration? Has it always been whatever your score is about to be?
No, I mean they're a 10 on a 10 scale. They're hyper political.
Always been that way, or
no? Absolutely not. It changed on September 12th when they became an intelligence entity, and they even said it. Bob Mueller even said it more than once that the FBI is now the Federal Bureau of Intelligence. They want to do pre-crime, so the intelligence cadre, they write products based on stuff that hasn't even happened yet, so we're going to take a look at Catholics who go to Latin Mass, for example, because they may be a problem. So you're leaving it up to college graduate, like right out of college graduate is what I mean, people with no real life experience that can surf through NSA databases and come up and say, you know what, this group of people may be a problem. So we need to open up an intelligence case on them, and then from there we can actually maybe build some actual criminal cases. But without predication, we're just going to open up a case on traditional Catholics or agave, anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremist. So no, it was September 12th.
Yeah. Okay.
But wait, it gets worse. So,
Oh no. Okay.
So when Mueller brought in McKinsey, they created something called integrated program management, and it is a process, a highly disciplined process, whereby they create their own metrics that determine success. So success is determined by disruptions or arrest or things of that nature. They decide how many FISAs are we going to open up? How many sources are we going to have? How many intelligence products are we going to write? What types of intelligence products we're going to write? So they lowball these predetermined statistics, before the beginning of the new fiscal year, and then at the end of the fiscal year, you're talking 5-figure bonuses for the special agent in charge for hitting these metrics that they intentionally lowball, and then these metrics are monitored not by like the intelligence directorate or something like that, some similar entity within the Bureau. It's monitored and tracked by HRD, the Human Resources Department. So if you're in a leadership position and you're continually crushing these metrics, this is what moves you up the organization. So they've created an entire framework that out of whole cloth where they determine what they make the determination what success is. They lowball the number, you hit success, and then you move up without any legal predication of a violation of law. And that was given to us by a man by the name of Dave Schlendorf. Spell it just like it sounds. You can find him on LinkedIn. He's now a consultant for some other company right now. But he was a good friend of Jim Comey's and Bob Mueller's.
Cool. Oh, goodness, George. Okay, so earlier I mentioned our mutual friend, Steve Friend, and I'd forgotten that I had printed out a tweet from him from back in August that I wanted for this discussion. Speaker Mike Johnson cast the deciding vote against an amendment that would have required a warrant for the government to spy on Americans under FISA Section 702. So can you please tell us why that's important? Why casting that vote and continuing FISA Section 702 the way it is? Why is that a bad thing then?
702 came about after the findings of the Church Committee or Church Commission. I don't know what people like to use. I think most people call it the Church Committee. And that's where they dragged in multiple members of the Central Intelligence Agency talking about assassinations overseas. And Jimmy Carter.
MK Ultra, right?
Yeah. So Jimmy Carter, afterwards, he wasn't the president during those hearings, gutted the CIA and tried to rein it in. And some people say that Jimmy Carter is ultimately responsible for 9/11. That's a whole nother week-long discussion. We're not going to go there tonight. But so also created at that time was the FISA Court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and that was there to try to provide a guardrails and a construct for the CIA and the NSA to operate under that wasn't extra constitutional. So this FISA Court, it doesn't convene in a physical location. It's actually a rotating series of judges that are cleared up to the top secret level. And you put together a package that goes in front of the court, and it's usually pretty thick. And it's, I think, like 99.8% approval rating, approval for FISA applications by the FISA court. So they almost never say no.
Right.
And even that 0.2% is usually just a rewrite. So it's pretty much 100%. So when the FBI goes and asks for a FISA warrant, they're going to get one. Mm-hmm. And the FISA gives you the ability to what's called two-hop. So say I'm going to go up on that arms dealer from Croatia, George Hill, and I can not only look at everything that George Hill's doing from a lawful standpoint, I can look at now everyone that George Hill is in contact with. So, I'm the FBI agent. I'm a hot runner. I've been with the Bureau all of 3 years, and I think I would be a great supervisor already. And I see that I know Keith Malik's involved in something. He runs he says it's an auto body shop, but I know it's a chop shop. He's doing something, So let's take a look at what Keith is doing too. And oh, by the way, Keith's sons work for him too. So we're going to take a look at them. So we're going to two-hop George Hill to the entire Malik family. So and so let's say one of your kids is involved with Antifa, which is now, I'm just saying for the sake of argument, a foreign terrorist organization. So now we're going to go up on a FISA on your son, so it's almost unlimited spying on the entire country. And I'm not exaggerating. It just takes a little bit of creativity and initiative on people to misuse it. Like I said, like I explained to that admiral, at the end of the day, it comes down to that man or woman doing the right thing. If you're, in a trust society.
I have very little faith in my fellow man.
And so did the framers, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. And here we are. So I made a note here because I wanted to ask you about this. Again, there is so much that gets thrown at us just in a 24-hour news cycle, much less over the past 24 years since 9/11. But I vaguely remember this, and shame on me for not knowing more on this, but I know that you've criticized Bank of America. They provided, remind me now, they provided the FBI some customer data or something, transactions. What was that about? Do you know?
So that was one of the things I testified to Jim Jordan's committee about behind closed doors.
Okay.
That the Democrats leaked to Rolling Stone magazine before I even got home, and they wrote a 3,000-word hit piece on me. So one of the things I talked about that came to light, the FBI's system of record is called Sentinel, and in Sentinel you write what's called, everything resides there, but it's also that they have a honey-do list they're referred to as leads, LEADS, and it's kind of like an electronic post-it note. Hey, do this. So my supervisor special agent counterpart got a lead stating that he is to open up cases based on this Bank of America list. And the reason that I would have this conversation with him is because I have two analysts, one at the Fusion Center and one at the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, that interact with him and the agents on his squad every day. And I'm like, well, where did they get this list? So we get the guy who sent the lead from, he worked at WFO, Washington Field Office, sometimes referred to as Worst Field Office. And the list was generated by Bank of America, according to him, of their own accord. And the list was everyone that was in DC. Every Bank of America customer who was either, in DC, they'd use a Bank of America product, whether it be a debit card or a credit card that we could, show that was in DC on January 6th, or had purchased a plane ticket that put them in DC on or about January 6th. I think they boxed the travel dates from 5 to 8 January. I think that was the time window that they boxed the tickets on. So if you use a Bank of America product to either while in DC or to buy a plane ticket to go to DC during that time block, you were on that list. And then they took that list and resorted it and stacked it so that if you had ever purchased a firearm in your life anywhere, you went to the top of that list. And WFO expected us to open up cases on all these people, to which my colleague responded with a gently worded response via email, but really when it comes down to it was the giant middle finger, and went out and talked to his boss and said, no, we're not doing that. And his boss was a former F-18 pilot and Naval Academy graduate. This is what I'm talking about. You have to have good people that are willing to stand against the tide. So I just named two of them, not by name, but by position. Two good people that said, no, we're not violating these people's constitutional rights. There's no predication here, So he told the guy to F off. Yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to tell my boss. And he said, well, go right ahead. I've already told my boss. So WFO boss calls the F-18 pilot and says, hey, you can't do this. And he said, yeah, well, F you too. So, well, I'm going to call your boss, who is the special agent in charge, right? So I said, go ahead. I already told him. So they called, somebody from WFO called Joe Bonavolanta, who was the SAC at the Boston office at that time. And he said, no, we're not going to do this. I'm going to talk to your boss, who at the time was Jill Sanborn, who ran the entire terrorism program for the FBI. She was short-lived because she wasn't one of the boys, not because she wasn't born with a twig and berries, but she just didn't play their silly-ass little games. Again, a good person doing the right thing. And Jill said, no, Joe, you don't have to do that. That's baloney. And she didn't last much longer after that. I think she was out within less than a year after that exchange. And so Director Wray, when he testified in front of Congress, I don't know the genesis of the list. I don't know if we requested it. I don't know whose email box it showed up in when it came from Bank of America. I don't know who from Bank of America sent it, and Jim Jordan never probed on it. Never, it's so easy, to look at, how the genesis of this list came about, and other field offices were thankful for it and went on and opened up cases on all those people.
For the record, that's not the first time that I've heard from someone informing me that Jim Jordan has received amazing information and didn't do much with it. And that's frustrating.
Well, I mean, you go on Hannity, you get a hit, and you send that out to your constituents. That's what you get out of it.
Yeah. I have a buddy of mine who is in law enforcement. And recently he and I were having an email exchange. And I knew this conversation was coming up about the surveillance state after 9/11. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to read some of this back and forth to George and see if he has some thoughts on it. The automated license plate recognition, something you're familiar with? Okay. Right. Okay. So
yes.
Awesome. I want to read a little bit from this email from my law enforcement buddy. I've been trying to sound the alarm in reference to automated license plate readers for some time. It is the epitome of police state surveillance systems. He goes on to talk about a nationwide system, blah, 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 blah. Okay, because I view it as a constitutionally troubling, troubling, and refuse to use this system. New guys getting into law enforcement today are all over the system. They love it. He says that he's been told by his bosses specifically to avoid mentioning the system in police reports when it's used to identify and apprehend someone. Well, it continues. He says the system, because I asked him, give me some specifics. What is this thing? He says the system tracks every vehicle on the road, records the time, date, location, and surrounding vehicles along with photos. This data is held indefinitely and is only limited by local laws or agency policy. The data that law enforcement agencies can utilize includes all data recorded by private entities like repo agencies, tow trucks, private companies seeking marketing data, etc. That means that if a tow truck with this LPR system attached, license plate reader, cruises an apartment complex parking lot looking for repo vehicles, it is recording every vehicle in that lot as a permanent data point that law enforcement can use later if they want to. It is associating each vehicle with those around it and the addresses. It is turning every entity with this system into a government agent, in my opinion, and is tracking innocent people in case the data needs to be used later. He goes on, he says, in training, the question came up why a warrant isn't needed to track someone this way, because normally a GPS requires a search warrant. The answer was the system only becomes illegal when enough exists to track people similarly to a full-time GPS tracker. He goes on to talk about where is the line. What are your thoughts, George Hill, to the license plate readers and all that? Because I didn't know any of this. I mean, this is... I should have...
As of this video, there is no linked national network. So if you're on the lam from, Pennsylvania and you're headed out to Wyoming, they're not going to be able to track your movements from state to state to state through some sort of national network. So each state operates their LPR. I know in Massachusetts, it's not functioning half the time, but that's when I retired. So that was 2 years ago. So that may have changed by now. And I know Massachusetts refuses to just leave it on and use it on constitutional basis, which is odd for a state like Massachusetts, who's fine with killing babies and taking my gun rights away, but they won't read your license plate. But be that as it may,
right.
They won't allow people to use it. But look, here at the end of the day, and to put it in prison parlance, if they want to get you, you're going to get got. Unless you find a way to digitally disappear, change your gait, change your face, and live on cash, you're going to get caught. Unless you're the guy who planted the bomb in front of the DNC on January 5th, you can run free for the rest of your life. Look, I participated in the scenario of manhunt. I know how these things work. If the government wants to get you, you will get got. Make no mistake about it. You might as well make plans on writing letters from prison.
Yeah. So I think I forgot when was this? Might have been on the Friday live stream last week. There was a band that had cameras focused on the crowd at their show. And just from the facial recognition, it put their picture up on the board behind them, the giant video wall. It identified who they were, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's real stuff, and it's in the hand of law enforcement agencies. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe, and hopefully we won't get jammed up by some lawyer here. I believe the name of the company is CP Clear, which is only available to law enforcement. Maybe one of your viewers can search it real quick, but I believe it's CP Clear, Charles Papa Clear, and their software is only available to law enforcement. And I can run a couple of images there, and I can look at every place your face ever showed up in social media posts or anywhere, to include your driver's license. And facial recognition has come a long way since that manhunt of the Scenarios. So, you know, law enforcement has reached omnipotent powers now.
How did you guys get how did you find them hiding under a boat cover, and how did that play out? Is there anything you can?
Yeah, it was just we were under tremendous pressure from the governor, who was under pressure from Barack Obama to lift the lockdown that had taken place for over 2 days. People
This
were
was a
locked in their
Boston
home.
Marathon bomber for those that.
Yeah, yep, April 15th. So that was 2014. Yeah. God. And one of the where the house where the boat was an older gentleman who's passed away now. Just a great guy. He was retired. He used to like taking kids from the children's hospital for cancer out on boat rides on his dime. And his wife didn't let him smoke in the house. So he hadn't had a cigarette for 2 days, and he was really hurting pretty bad. And he went out to this small little back deck, and he saw the Tyvek that his boat had been wrapped in at the end of the season, flapping in the breeze. And he's like, I think I secured that. And so he went into the garage, got a ladder, put it up against the boat, started climbing up the ladder, and saw the blood on the engine cowling where Jahar had left. And came down the ladder and made the phone call. And how he survived that fusillade of bullets is beyond me, because I went to the site the next morning and there were holes everywhere. I mean, the privacy fence, the garage, the boat. I mean, how he didn't get shot was a mystery. And now he's escaped the death penalty, which I'm kind of glad for. Let him spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back to where we started. I just have maybe one or two more questions here for you. The premise of the show was, is America after 9/11? Are we safer? Did the terrorists win? And you've had to deal with a lot of high value targets. You talked about your time there at Gitmo. And what was the guy's name? Abu Bad Guy from Tradeoffs.
Yeah,
I will never forget that for as long as I live, George.
Not a nice man.
You're not a nice man. So
He's not.
He's not a nice man. Okay, so again, and I asked it earlier, and I'm just asking it again, just because I'm annoying that way. Is there anything? Is there an elevator pitch? Is there anything you can say about the laws and the Patriot Act and the things that came after 9/11? Is there anything that has made us safer as a country?
No, it's actually made us unsafer. I, like so many Americans, have been focused on kinetic attacks in the country emanating from jihadi groups overseas, and I miss the real threat that lives amongst us. All one has to do is take a look at what's happening in Western Europe now, who have been overrun by 7th century illiterates from Islamic countries, destroying those countries, rape cases going up 1,000% throughout Europe. And now we're seeing it in Flint, Michigan, in Texas, and other places. We have missed the true threat, which is unfettered immigration. People need to understand that Islam is not a religion. It is a political ideology with a religious component. I was fortunate enough that my linguist in Gitmo was a former professor at Al-Ansar University in Cairo. A brilliant man. It was very helpful in helping me understand Islam. We would read the Quran and the Hadiths on a regular basis because the Saudis practice the best interrogation technique out there, which is don't say anything. But if you start talking about religion, you can't shut them up. So in order to do that, you have to approach it from a basis of knowledge. Well, I never read the Quran and had no reason to, or the Hadiths, which are essentially loosely translated are the tales of Muhammad, which were written 300 years after Muhammad's death. So
Mm.
people need to understand what we're up against here. Islam, they say, is a religion of peace, but they never finish the sentence. It's peace through submission, in that man submits, or woman submits to the will of man, man submits to the will of God. Islam replaces all that came before it. Christianity replaced Judaism, and Muhammad is God's last prophet on earth, and he replaces Christianity because the Muslims do not believe that Christ was the Son of God. So we've missed the real threat, which is unfettered immigration from these Islamic countries. They do not assimilate. They cannot assimilate under Sharia law. They cannot assimilate. They cannot live by man's laws. In this country, it's problematic because we have something called the Supremacy Clause, which means that no other law in the country shall exist above that of the Constitution. So that's a real problem for the Islamic community. Keith Ellison, who's now a member of Congress, used to be the district attorney in Minnesota. And then I forget he might have been in Minneapolis at some point in time in his career. But when he was a congressional representative, he tried to get Sharia law enacted in his district and was shot down pretty handily because of the Supremacy Clause. But they're going to come back, and they're going to try again and again and again and again. And Dearborn, Michigan is now 50% Islamic. And if you want to listen to the call to prayer at 5 o'clock in the morning, move to Dearborn, Michigan.
And a mayor that doesn't want you there if you dislike certain roads being named after.
Yeah, they don't assimilate. They can't assimilate. They won't assimilate.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we go, is there any last thoughts you'd like to share about America and what has happened to us since 9/11? I think you pretty much summed it up nicely there.
Look, getting away from the Patriot Act, but I'm deeply concerned about where we are right now with these killings, with ICE and everybody being either fascist, a Hitler, or a Nazi, or whatever. What we're seeing after Charlie Kirk's brutal assassination is the political leadership in our country, in conjunction with the legacy media, they're building a moral framework wherein they're giving license to violence. And once a country goes down the path of political violence, there is no coming back from it. So it's not going to be blue and gray lining up on the battlefield. It's going to be neighbor on neighbor, random killings, which could escalate. David Best, who is a professor at the King's College, Department of War Studies in the United Kingdom, lays out all the criteria, and he says that England is actually in a civil war right now, that it's going to go from bad to worse. Those same criteria exist in this country. We have a lot more speed bumps and things that'll keep us from going down that path. The British have very little control over who governs them. Fortunately, we do. But I just want to close with a warning that there is no coming back from political violence. And we need to stop othering people and dehumanizing them, because then it makes it easier to hurt them physically, literally. And that's what I want to close with. Not a kumbaya moment. We're in a very dangerous time right now. But this name calling has to stop. It's not helping.
George Hill, it's always a great discussion with you. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate you sharing it here yet again on At the Mic. And I look forward to the next time that we can gather. So thank you for your time, sir. And
hopefully this was helpful for your audience. That's all I really care about. So,
absolutely it was. All right, you be safe. Everyone watching, please be safe, and we will see you all in about 22 hours from now for the Friday live stream here on X. Thanks so much, all.